What would you say if the very people trying to kill you suddenly went silent and gave you one chance to speak? How do you defend your faith when the crowd has already made up their mind about you? And could your story, your personal encounter with God, be powerful enough to stop anger in its tracks? In Acts 21:37 through 22-21, we witness one of the most remarkable moments in Paul's life. Just minutes earlier, he was being beaten by an uncontrollable crowd, dragged out of the temple, accused without evidence and nearly killed. Chaos filled the air. Rage echoed through the streets. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, something unexpected happens. As Roman soldiers carry Paul up the steps to the barracks to protect him, he turns to the commander and asks a simple question. "May I say something to you?" The commander is surprised. He responds in Greek, realizing that Paul is not who he assumed. He had thought Paul might be an Egyptian revolutionary who had caused an uprising. But Paul calmly identifies himself as a Jew from Tarsus, a citizen of no ordinary city. And then he asks for permission, not to escape, not to defend himself with force, but to speak to the people. This is courage in its purest form. Paul is not thinking about his safety, he is thinking about his mission. Permission is granted. And then, standing on the steps, bruised and likely still in pain, Paul raises his hand. The crowd begins to quiet down. The same voices that were shouting for his death now fall into a tense silence, and Paul begins to speak, not in Greek but in Aramaic, the language of the people. This matters, because in that moment, Paul is not distancing himself from them, he is connecting with them. He is saying, "I am one of you." He begins with respect. "Brothers and fathers, listen now to my defense." There is no anger in his voice, no bitterness, no retaliation, just a calm, steady invitation to hear the truth. And what does he do next? He tells his story. Not a theological debate, not an argument filled with complex reasoning. He shares his testimony, his personal encounter with God. "I am a Jew, born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city. I studied under Gamaliel and was thoroughly trained in the law of our ancestors. I was just as zealous for God as any of you are today." With these words, Paul establishes common ground. He reminds them that he understands their passion, their commitment, their devotion. He is not an outsider attacking their beliefs. He was once exactly like them. And then he goes deeper. "I persecuted the followers of this way to their death, arresting both men and women and throwing them into prison." This is not an easy admission. Paul is openly confessing his past, a past filled with violence against the very people he now represents. He is not hiding it. He is not softening it. He is bringing it into the light. Why? Because his transformation only makes sense when you understand where he came from. He continues, explaining how the high priest and the council can confirm his story. He had authority. He had power. He had a mission to destroy the followers of Jesus. And then, everything changed. About noon, as I came near Damascus, suddenly a bright light from heaven flashed around me. This is the turning point, a moment that interrupted his entire life. I fell to the ground and heard a voice say to me, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" Imagine that, a voice from heaven calling his name, not condemning him immediately, but questioning him. Paul responds, "Who are you, Lord?" And the answer changes everything. "I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting." In that instant, Paul realizes the truth. The very one he thought he was opposing in defense of God was actually God himself. His entire understanding is shaken, his direction is reversed, his purpose is redefined. Paul describes how those with him saw the light but did not understand the voice. He was led by the hand into Damascus because the brightness had blinded him. The man who once walked in confidence now walks in darkness, completely dependent. And in that place of brokenness, God begins to rebuild him. A man named Ananias, a devout observer of the law and respected by all the Jews living there, comes to Paul. This detail is important. Paul emphasizes Ananias' reputation to show that this was not a rebellious figure, but a faithful man within their tradition. Ananias stands beside him and says, "Brother Saul, receive your sight." And at that moment, Paul can see again. But more than physical sight is restored, spiritual vision is awakened. Ananias continues, "The God of our ancestors has chosen you to know his will and to see the righteous one and to hear words from his mouth." This is calling, this is purpose, this is identity being rewritten. You will be his witness to all people of what you have seen and heard. Paul is no longer a persecutor. He is now a messenger. Now what are you waiting for? Get up, be baptized, and wash your sins away, calling on his name. This is transformation, immediate, complete, real. Paul doesn't present himself as perfect. He presents himself as changed. And that is the power of a testimony. It is not about proving your worth. It is about revealing God's work. Paul continues his story, describing how he returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple when he fell into a trance. He saw the Lord speaking to him. "Quick, leave Jerusalem immediately, because the people here will not accept your testimony about me." Even then, Paul struggled to understand. He responds, reminding the Lord of his past, that he had persecuted believers, that he had stood approvingly at the death of Stephen. It's as if Paul is saying, they will listen to me because they know who I was. But God sees differently. Go, I will send you far away to the Gentiles. This is the moment that shifts everything. Up until now, the crowd has been listening. They have heard Paul's background. They have heard his transformation. They have heard his encounter with God. But when he says this, when he speaks of being sent to the Gentiles, their reaction changes instantly. The silence breaks. The anger returns. Because this challenges their boundaries, their identity, their understanding of who God's message is for, and they cannot accept it. But Paul had to say it. Because truth is not shaped by what people are comfortable hearing. It is spoken in obedience to what God has revealed. This moment teaches us something deeply important. Your story matters. Your testimony carries power. But not everyone will accept it. Paul shared his journey with honesty, humility, and courage. He did not hide the difficult parts. He did not exaggerate the good. He simply told the truth of what God had done in his life. And for a moment it broke through the noise. It created silence. It opened a door. But when truth challenged deeply held beliefs, resistance returned. This is the reality of sharing your faith. Some will listen, some will be moved, and some will reject it. But your responsibility is not to control the outcome. It is to be faithful in telling the story. Think about your own life. What has God brought you through? What moments changed your direction? What experiences opened your eyes? You may not have a story as dramatic as Paul's, but you have a story. And someone out there needs to hear it. Because your story is not just about you, it is about what God can do. Paul stood before a hostile crowd, physically exhausted, emotionally drained, and still chose to speak. Not to defend himself, but to testify about Jesus. That is courage, that is purpose, that is faith in action. And even though the crowd eventually rejected his message, that moment was not wasted. Because every time truth is spoken, it leaves an impact, whether seen immediately or not. So don't underestimate your voice. Don't hide your story. Don't let fear silence what God has done in your life. Because in a world filled with noise, a genuine testimony can still create a moment of silence, where hearts are opened, even if just for a second. And sometimes that second is enough for God to begin working. Paul's story reminds us that transformation is possible, that no past is too broken, that no mistake is too great, that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. From persecutor to preacher, from enemy to ambassador, from blindness to vision. That is the power of encountering Jesus, and that same power is still alive today. So wherever you are in your journey, remember this: your story matters, your voice matters, and when you share what God has done in your life, you are stepping into the same mission that Paul embraced: to be a witness, to speak truth, to shine light, even in the darkest places. Thank you for watching this video. If this message encouraged you, don't forget to like, follow the channel, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this powerful reminder today.